All right, so chapter 5 of the leadership textbook is titled Leadership and Power. So, one of the things that I found interesting that it opened up with was a quote. It says, "To say a leader is preoccupied with power is saying like a tennis player is preoccupied with making shots his opponent cannot return." Of course, leaders are preoccupied with power. The significant questions are what means do they use to gain it, and how do they exercise it? And then also, to what ends do they exercise it? That quote was by John Gardner. So next thing that the chapter goes into is the subtitle of power and leadership. So from there we learn that power is the ability to influence others. We learn that power is also the capacity to translate intention into reality and sustain it. Leadership is the wise use of this power. We also come to find out that vision is the commodity of leaders and power is their currency. So that led into the next thing of what sources of power. What are the sources of power? So first one was the coercive power. And coercive power is the ability to administer punishment or to give negative reinforcements. This kind of reminded me of like a prison guard almost. The next one was reward power, and that's the ability to deliver something of value to others, and the reward can be tangible or intangible. Next one was legitimate power, which legitimate power resides in the position rather than in the person. Kind of a boss, for instance. They have the title. I mean, yes, they're powerful, but the position's what makes them the most powerful at that point. Next is the expert power, when that's based on the person and not the position. Next, we have referent power, which is a role model power. That's just kind of someone that you look up to, and that they know that that people look up to them, so therefore they have that referent power to them. Next is the information power. The information power is based on access and distribution of data. And then finally, wrapping up the sources of power is the ecological power. The ecological power arises out of control over the physical environment, technology, and how work is actually organized. So using all those sources of power and just from the information that we gained from what exactly power is and how it kind of applies to leadership, we then learn to go into the next part of the chapter, which is deciding what types of power to use. So the first thing that it says was to look at the benefits and cost of each type with group members that you have. And it broke it down into hard power and soft power. So hard power uses inducements, which can either be bonuses or raises, and then also threats, which can be firings or lawsuits. The next one is soft power, and that's based on attracting others rather than forcing or indulging. So what it came down to between those two was effective leaders combine hard and soft power into smart power to achieve their goals. And the chapter led into engaging in constructive organizational politics. So what came from that was first to identify political behavior you want to engage in. From there, you articulate your purpose and what you want to achieve. From there, you consider important elements of the context, including history, culture, ethics, and motivations. And then from there, you go on and you name those involved who need to be influenced or can exert influence. And by that, it means anticipate possible reactions to your plan. You take responsibility for your role in the strategy. And then you also consider whether your actions will be consistent with your values of your organization. And then finally, you kind of have to use that to determine how to leverage change. So next, the chapter leads into the concept of powerful and powerless talk and the difference between those. So the first thing is powerful talk. Powerful talk makes speakers seem knowledgeable and confident in themselves. Makes it really sound like you know what you're talking about. Powerless speaking, on the other hand, is tentative and submissive. You kind of see a really kind of hint of not confident in what they're saying, and that kind of leads into the forms of powerless talk, which pretty self-explanatory based off of what the image you have in your head of it, which is hesitations, which include like well, or hedges where you're saying kinda or I guess. You're not confident, so you have to ask tag questions, which includes like, isn't that right? The next one is like you have to use exclaimers where you start off a sentence with "Don't get me wrong" or "but," and then the next one would be accounts, which is just simply excuses or justifications. and then also SID parties where you're constantly saying like or simply, just something along those lines. So from there, the chapter leads on to empowerment. And empowerment, the main key that I got from there was the 5 major reasons why leaders choose to share power. First one being it increases the job satisfaction and performance of employees. Second one is that it fosters greater cooperation among group members. But then the third one is collective survival. The fourth is facilitates personal growth and learning. And then finally, wrapping that up, is prevents power abuses. So from there, based off of empowerment, the chapter breaks down components of the empowerment process, which there's 3 of those, which it's simply modifying the environment, building intrinsic motivation, and supplying resources. And then from there, it goes on to the empowerment models, and this kind of summarizes up the chapter. But the first one is super leadership and self-leadership, and that includes changing organizational structures, changing organizational processes, but then also changing interpersonal communication patterns. Next is the leading the journey, and that kind of focuses on determining focus and direction, removing obstacles, developing ownership, and stimulating self-directed actions. And yeah, that's chapter 5 in a nutshell.